Hey everyone, today on the plastic canvas we're painting Will from Zombie 15. Hey everyone, Matt here from the Plastic Canvas and welcome to another video in this Zombie 15 Survivor series. Zombie 15 is a super fast-paced co-op real-time game. Zombie 15 because it goes for 15 minutes. Minis are moving around really quickly. Lots and lots of fun. But thematically in the game, seems like all of the people that are under 18 are the only ones that are immune from the game. So all of the minis, the playable characters in this game, are kids. So they're all pretty small. This here's Will. He's the smallest of the survivors. If I bring in like Vance, who I'm also painting along at the moment, Vance is a pretty typical size. You can see the size difference there. So Will's pretty small. Even to give you a bit more of an idea, if I bring in one of my paint bottles here, this is a half-ounce size, you can see the size difference there. So yeah, pretty small. So we're not going for a super high quality, or actually anywhere near a super high quality finish for these guys, because they do move around on the board so quickly. They're not spending the time on the table like they would be in a different game where people are actually going to be able to see them over an extended period and notice the details. So just barely a tabletop quality, just good enough to do the job. So you'll notice that he's already, well underway. If you haven't checked out the other videos, particularly the Siphon video where at the start I explain why these minis are already sort of half painted, please go and check that out. At least watch the start of that. I've already gone through that, so I won't spend the time explaining that in this video. I'm just going to get in and start some painting. So just a quick bit of an explanation about what I've done so far to get to this point. So obviously he's been primed. He is a black brush-on primer. Now the reason why I use a brush-on primer as opposed to spray-on is just purely because back when I first bought my first lot of paints, I just didn't know what I know now. I read a lot of things on different forums about priming. Obviously people were talking a lot about spray primers, but a lot about the humidity and the temperature, things that you need to be mindful of. Even in some areas, there's only particular times of the year that you can prime, and it was just a bit hard to get my head around. But there were some people that were talking about brush-on primers, and yeah, they just didn't have those issues. They could prime whenever they wanted to, could prime inside, didn't have to worry about overspray or anything like that. So yeah, so that's why I use a brush-on primer, but I will definitely be getting some spray-on primers in my next paint order, and it'll be a black and a white, because what I've really found, which is not going to be a surprise to anyone that has painted before, is that if you're painting lighter colours, especially like skin tones and yellows are really a real pain to paint over black. If I bring in Siphon here, who I've finished, that yellow going over the top of black, it just takes those extra few coats to get that real pigmentation to come through. And the same with the skin tone, it just takes those extra couple of layers. But over a white base, white prime, it just takes less layers. Those brighter colours come through sooner. But if you're painting greens, blues, like those sorts of colours, blacks worked really well on them. So yeah, so primed first, then to get to the point with the base coating, you might have heard people talking about painting inside out. That's exactly what I do. It's the way that's worked, I've found easiest. All it means is starting with the lowest layer and then working your way up from there. So often when I'm painting, I try and think about, if I was this mini, sort of how would I get dressed? What order would the clothes go on? Now you always start with the skin. That's pretty well regardless of the mini. That's what I always start with. And then like the socks and the boots here are a good example. So I painted the socks before his shoes because if you think about the way they actually work, the shoes go over the top of the socks. So if a little bit of paint from the shoe went onto the sock, because the shoe is supposed to be over the sock, it doesn't stand out as much. But if some of the paint from the sock went onto the shoe because the shoe is going underneath, because the sock is going underneath the shoe, it stands out more as being wrong. So started with the skin. And now I started this guy a couple of weeks ago, so I'm trying to think back to exactly what I did. But yeah, sort of been skin, then probably did his shorts, because the shorts are going over the skin, so that's fine to go in that order. And then that would have been before his shirt, because his shirt is going over the shorts. So just for the same reasons, if a bit of the red happened to go onto the grey, it's not as much of an issue as if the grey went onto the red. Obviously, we try not to do it at all, but if it happens. And then, put it on the socks before the shoes, again for the same reasons. Gloves, his little sweatband thing there. Hair after the skin, for those same reasons that I've mentioned. And his hat hasn't been done yet, which is fine because hair's done, hat comes after that. Again, thinking of those layers, working the top layer last, the hat goes over the top of the hair, and then his chain with the it's hard to tell at this scale because it is so small, but there's spanners on the end of the chain there. So that's how I've gotten to this point. As you can see, I still need to do another coat on his shirt, still need to do his hat, and then get into some of the finer, just finishing off details. I'm not going to go too far with Will because he is so small, and just because of the nature of the game, they just don't spend enough time on the table to worry about all of those finer details. But just bringing in his card, so here's what Will end up looking like. That's sort of what we're going for. Yeah, so coming along. Now, what I've, if I just bring in Severity, who I've painted as well, you might have seen the Severity video already. I didn't do any highlighting or shading with her, just because she's quite a flat model, and just because of the scale of her, I just didn't think it was worth spending the time to really go into some highlighting and shading. What I'm thinking I might do with Will is when I'm painting his shirt, just as a bit of an experiment, I might try wet blending in some highlights into the top of his shirt, like along the top of his arms and at the top of his back, just where more of that light would be catching, and then just blending that in and then not having any highlighting at all down the bottom, so that then if I put a red wash over the top, it'll tie it all together and give a bit of shading, but then it'll bring that contrast in at the top, and then that'll just save me some time instead of going back after doing a wash and then putting some highlighting in. So didn't worry about it with Severity. Same reasons why I'm not going to go too far into it with Will, but that's what I'm thinking. So rather than stopping the video and then explaining it at the time, when you see me doing that, that's what I'm going to have a go at. Not sure if it'll work. The wash going over the top of that, who knows, it might not work, but yeah, we'll give it a go and just see if that's a quick way of adding at least some contrast, some highlighting, without having to spend too much time on it. So I'm going to get into that. So I'll finish base coating, and then we'll get into some of those finer details. So just before I do sort of get into it too much, obviously really, really important when you're painting to be thinning down your paints. Different paints from like the different makers have different thicknesses. Reaper is what I paint with, just purely because it seemed like a good starter set, and I'm still using those paints from my starter set, and they are already quite thin, but I still do thin them down a little bit because the the thinner your paint is, the smoother it is, and so the smoother it dries. Obviously you don't want to over thin and then it starts running. But I've got an acrylic retarder, just this one, drying retarder, this one here. It just extends the workable life of the paint, especially if I'm going to be doing some blending in there. It's going to help with that. So I just put just a bit of paint on my wet palette, and then just mix some of that in, and that gives it a pretty good consistency. You can just mix water in, that's absolutely fine. That's what I used to do before I had that drying retarder, but I found that sort of takes the place of it pretty well. Alright, so with all of that done, going to get into finishing off the base coat of Will, and then we'll get into those finishing touches. Just quickly at this point, if you're wondering what size brush I'm using, so I use the Army Painter Wargamer series. This is just my character brush. I do have a Regiment, Character, Detail, and Insane Detail. I've been using the Regiment a lot for the bigger minis in this series, but will be in the size that he is. Character's going to be doing the job for him. Just so I don't have to worry too much about painting on, getting paint anywhere that I don't want to. And I'll just quickly note it now, I can already see that this is going to need another layer. So I'm not going to blend in those highlights now. I'll wait until the final layer. So I'll do this layer, let it all dry, and then come back for another pass with the red, and I'll add the blending in there. Meant to mention it back at the top of the video. I have changed cameras for this video. The first three, so Siphon, Vance, and the Severity videos, were just done with the camera on my phone. Seem to be doing the job, but we'd also have this other camera. This is a dedicated, so it's a Sony Cybershot, I think. It's definitely Sony. I just thought I'd give this a go just to see if the focus works a little bit better. So if you've been watching the other videos and then you're now watching this one, or even if you haven't seen them and then you do end up watching them, please let me know in the comments down below if you found that the quality of the picture in this video is better, or if you thought the other ones were better, just so that I sort of know what's going to be best for using from here on. But yeah, so just keep a bit of an eye on that, and if you think this is better, let me know, or if you think the quality of the Siphon, Vance, and Severity ones were better, let me know that as well. His eyes at the moment. In the first three videos in this series, I've slowed down and done an explanation of how I go about painting the eyes on minis. I'm not going to do an explanation in this one, so if you haven't seen the Siphon, Vance, or Severity videos, please go and check them out, and I do run through how I go about doing the eyes. It is one part that a lot of people seem to have trouble with, and I found a good way of doing it along the way. But yeah, I've already spent the time explaining it in a few videos, so I won't worry about bogging this one down with it. Yep, so if you haven't seen them, go and check out one of those videos. If you have, I'm just doing the ones for Will in the exact same way. So just while I'm wet blending here, I'm just mixing some white in with my red, and then just starting at the top of the arms, and then just literally blending that wet paint into the red paint, which is still wet. But then, so I blend it sort of, you know, down into his back. Then I start again at the top, but just don't blend as far. Then start again at the top, don't blend as far, just to try and get that gradual sort of gradient. You can see along the top there, top of his arm, and on the top of his back, it's just a little bit brighter than what it is down the bottom there. So I'll keep working at this. I'm going to try and get a good contrast between the top of his arms and sort of the top of his back, sort of shoulder blades there, and on his chest as well. Bit of contrast up there to what there is down the bottom, so that then when I do a wash over the top, just to give a bit of just a little bit more depth and a bit more detail, yeah, that should come through a little bit, and that contrast will be kept there. Alright, so just a little tip for everyone at home. If you're going to change your camera, use a different one, make sure that you've checked that it has enough battery to last for the filming that you want to do. Just at the end of the last video there, I noticed that the timer was off, actually the screen was off, and yeah, she'd run out of battery. So it's charged up again now, so we're going to keep on going. So I did paint for a little bit longer without realising that the camera had turned off. You can see I've done that wet blending to get a little bit of contrast just on the top of Will's shoulders, across his back and his chest. Yeah, so I was just working acrossways towards the end. You probably wouldn't have seen it so much, just to get a smooth blend. So just working acrossways just to gradually blend the lighter red sort of well on the way to pink there into the red, just to get that smooth transition there. I could probably build the contrast up a little bit more. I'm not sure if it's actually going to have the effect that I want, but yeah, we'll see when we get into actually doing the wash that'll go over the top. So yeah, so I'm just going to keep going on with base coating. Need to finish off his hat, and then yeah, I'm going to do highlighting the different parts, doing some shades, and then he'll be pretty close to being done. Alright, so I went ahead and I added a bit of a highlight just to the top of his hat as well, so that when I put a shade on there, that'll just have that contrast as well. And I went ahead and just lightened that up a little bit. So yeah, so he's just sort of got that ring of light around the top, that'll just build a bit of contrast. So I'm just going to go and give a bit of a highlight to the chain there, just while the red on the hat dries, because the peak and the front part of the top there's an orange colour, so I need to mix that up. But yeah, we're just about done with base coating. But just quickly though, so with the drying retarder that I've got, when doing blending like that, when I first started doing blending, or wet blending, sorry, it really was a bit of a race against the clock, and yeah, the paint would just really start to dry too quickly. We're still able to get the effect, but yeah, it just didn't have that workable time with it. But with that drying retarder in there, it just holds it back long enough that you can keep blending it without it taking hours to dry. So it has definitely helped with doing blends. Alright, just while the bit of orange is drying there, it'll need a second coat. I'm going to go ahead and start doing some washes. So I'm going to use Nuln Oil on his shorts, just to bring out some of the details. It'll just be a grey highlight back up, and I think his his shirt there's dry enough that I'll be able to do a wash on there and see if doing that contrast has worked. I don't think I'm going to knock the highlights on the chain down at all. I might just leave that as is, because that's where a lot of the blood effect will be going, and if it sort of seems like it might be a bit bright, which I don't think it is, I can use the blood effect to kind of cover that up. So I think that's probably where I'm going to leave it at the moment. I really need to wait for those washes to properly dry before I can do any highlighting, and I want the last step to be, well, obviously need to do the base, but then the blood effects as well, so I'm not even going to be touching them onto the chain. So I might leave that for a little while to dry properly, and then come back and do the last few steps to finish him off. So yeah, so we'll come back when that's all dry, and then we'll get Will finished. Alright, so now that everything's had a good time to dry, can see that with his shirt after the wash went on, it's more or less had the effect that I wanted it to. It still looks lighter across the top of his arms and his back, and that sort of gives a bit of an effect of a simple effect of light hitting him there. But I think I like the look of it more before the wash went on. It just stood out, like it obviously stood out more, but I think the transition was still a bit smoother, and the wash sort of hasn't done really what I wanted it to there. So still more or less got the effect, but I think if I was going to do that again in the future, which I think was a fine way to actually quickly get some just that quick effect of light, yeah, I wouldn't do the wash over the top, but I'm not going to go back and like redo it. I'm still happy enough with how it looks there, but yeah, it'd be skip the wash step for that part. But the wash on his shorts has come up well, so I'm going to do a little bit of highlighting there. So I'm now just at the sort of touching up kind of stage, so I'll highlight his shorts. I notice there's a couple of spots on his hat there where there's still a bit of black that I missed, so I'll be touching that up, and then onto the blood effects. So yeah, just getting ready to finish off Will. So happy with how Will's looking there after a couple of those finishing touches. I still do need to do the blood. Just quickly on when I was there highlighting, just the easiest way I've found to do it so far is so obviously it's been base coated in grey, then I did a black wash over the top just to just for it to flow into those recesses to create the shading. Then when I highlight, I just highlight with the same coat that I base coated with. That way it just it gives the best chance of the colour looking right. Sorry, when I first started painting, I was before I had washes, I was trying to use just mixing in white and black with the base coat. Sorry, mixing white or black in with the base coat just to try and create the highlight and the shade tones. And it was just, it wasn't looking right. It was giving the effect, but it wasn't looking right. But since getting the shades, yeah, my highlighting and shading's definitely gotten better. So yeah, just the wash and then the base coat back over, and then just for the real final spots where most of the light's going to be hitting, then just a little bit of white mixed in with the base coat, then just a touch up. So just like across the top of this little pouch the pocket on the side of his shorts, just across the top, just for the last little bit, just mixed in a little bit of white there, but everything else is just pretty well the base coat. So what I was doing there a little bit was, for the real sort of sharp highlights, so like across the top of that pocket there, for instance, it was just a very thin line, so just like sort of edge highline. But then down the bottom here, so put that line of paint along the bottom, but then it's a bad habit. Then just you could do it with water, I suppose. I do it with my mouth. Just quickly lick the brush, wash off that paint, wet the bristles a little bit, and then just feather out the edge to then work it up so it's not just a sharp line, but it gradually blends into that highlight. And it's what I did just across the top of his shorts, just in there. So again, did that line of paint, licked off the paint, wet the bristles a bit, and then just feather it down. So rather than trying to paint like the highlight tone that I want and then building up, so then going a bit darker, until it's down at that base coat, just blend it down, feather it down, and that's what I've done in a few different spots there. Same sort of thing on top of the glove there. So just a bit lighter. Knock the paint off the brush, get it a bit wet, and then just feather it out. But yeah, so other than the blood effect, I think Will's looking pretty good. Certainly for his size, it's what I've done there is enough. Again, if I bring in Severity, who is a typical size for the rest of the other minis, and she is small for a general mini anyway. You can see Will's pretty small there, so I'm just going to go ahead and do the blood, and then his base. And yeah, so his base will be, the top of his base will be red, not going for like a concrete or road sort of look, which is where they on the board most of their time is spent out on the road, because these characters need to be really, really quickly identified, and so Will is the red character, and so keeping his base red just adds to the ease of picking him out. So it's for no other reason other than that. So in the first 3 videos of this series, Siphon, Advance and Severity, I've gone through how I go about doing the blood effects. If you haven't seen any of them, go and check them out. Now that I've done it a few times, I'm not going to go through it in this video. It's pretty simple, so you should be able to tell just from watching what I'm doing. There's not much to it. The most important thing is just about getting the tone of the blood right, whether you're mixing brown or not. Just goes for the way you want the blood to look and how much you want it to stand out. But yeah, so just going to do the blood effect, paint his base, and then he'll be done. Alright, so since the last part of the video there where I was painting the base on Will, I've gone ahead and done a second coat on there just to finish him off, but I figured you guys didn't need to see me doing that, so I just went ahead and finished his base off. And yeah, now we can call Will finished, so here's our 4th Zombie 15 Survivor done. So as usual, thanks very, very much for spending the time to watch me paint. I hope you've gotten something out of it, something that you can take away for your own painting, or at the very least you've just enjoyed watching me paint him. As I always say, please down the bottom leave a comment, something that you've enjoyed about the video, something that you liked, and something that you think could be improved. I'm always looking to make these videos as good as possible, and I can only do that if you guys leave a bit of feedback. I can't judge that just on my own. So yeah, so if you can leave a comment below, something that you enjoyed, something that you think can be improved, I'd really, really appreciate that. And yeah, not much more to say other than that. If you did like it, please like and subscribe so that you can keep up to date with when these videos come out. I'm going to try and get at least a video a week, but yeah, if you hit that subscribe button, you'll keep up to date, and that just also lets me know that you guys are enjoying these videos. So, happy painting, everyone, and this is Matt from the Plastic Canvas signing out. Cheers!